There's a moment in almost every investigation where you look back and you ask one question: did we miss something? And not because people weren't working hard or people just didn't care, but because in those first few hours, you just don't know what you don't know yet. And in this case, we now know something wasn't available early on: a suspect.
2:47 a.m. Hold that timestamp. Not as a detail, as a question. Because at 2:47 in the morning on February 1st, 2026, a call was placed to a prepaid burner phone somewhere in or near Tucson, Arizona. The call lasted under 3 minutes. No carrier record identifies the originating number as belonging to a named account. No billing address, no service contract. Someone purchased that phone in cash, activated it for a single purpose, and kept it powered on through the night, waiting. According to information that has surfaced among investigators and case followers in early April of 2026, that call contained 3 things: a status update on a person's condition, a reference to a failed ransom attempt, and coordination instructions directed at an individual named Marcus. We do not yet know who the victim is. We do not yet know what the failed ransom means. We know only that someone, calm enough to dial, composed enough to speak in operational terms at 2:47 in the morning, was managing a situation that had already happened. That is the first thing to understand about this case. The call is not the crime. The call is the audit. Someone checking that the plan held. A burner phone purchased in cash tells you one thing immediately: whoever bought it anticipated scrutiny. You do not pay cash for a prepaid phone because you forgot your wallet. You do it because you have already calculated what investigators will find when they pull phone records, and you have decided they will not find you. That is not impulsive behavior. That is a person who has thought through the investigation that will follow. The burner phone is not a clue. It is a confession of intent. So, before we get to the victim, before we get to the crime scene, before we reconstruct a single minute of January 31st, 2026, hold that phone in your mind. Someone bought it. Someone kept the number private. Someone told exactly one person that number. And when that person called at 2:47 in the morning to report on a failed ransom and a woman's condition, the person holding the phone already knew both things were possible outcomes. They had prepared for them. The question this entire video is built to answer is not who made that call. It is when the planning that made that call necessary first began. This channel covers cases like this one every week: the forensic detail, the timeline gaps, the investigative decisions that shaped what happened next. If the Nancy Guthrie case is something you've been following, subscribe now and stay with this video. Because what we lay out in the next 30 minutes reframes everything that has been reported about this disappearance, starting with when it actually began. Her name is Nancy Guthrie. She was 84 years old. She lived alone in a residential neighborhood in Tucson, Arizona, in a home she knew well enough to navigate in the dark, because it was hers, and she had made it hers, and that familiarity was the texture of a life built over decades. To understand what was taken from her and from the people who loved her, you have to understand what her days looked like before January 31st, 2026. Nancy had a schedule. She had dinner plans she kept, appointments she honored, a rhythm of contact with family members who knew, in the way that families of elderly parents know, exactly what consistent communication looked and felt like. They knew when she would call. They knew when she would arrive. They knew when her absence meant something was wrong, because her presence had always been that reliable. That reliability was not incidental. It is the reason her disappearance was recognized within hours, not days. It is also, as this investigation will show, precisely the kind of information that a planned abduction requires. You cannot build an operational timeline around a target whose movements are unpredictable. Nancy's movements were not unpredictable. They were known. Her home had a back door, standard residential construction, a secondary entry point that most people use out of habit without thinking about its security implications. Nancy used sleeping medication, a detail her family knew, a detail her physician knew, a detail that, in the hands of someone planning an abduction, tells you something critical. There is a window of the night when she is most vulnerable, least likely to hear, least likely to respond to sound. The home had security cameras. I want you to notice something about those three details: the back door, the sleep medication, the cameras. Right now, in this act, they are domestic facts. They are the architecture of an ordinary household and the routine of an 84-year-old woman managing her own health. They are not evidence yet. Hold them as ordinary details, because that is exactly how the person who used them held them until the moment they became operational data. Everything someone would need to take her, they already knew. But we are not there yet. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie went to dinner. This is confirmed. The specific location and companions at that dinner remain part of the active investigation, and we will not speculate beyond what has been established. What is confirmed is the return. She came home. The last verified sighting of Nancy Guthrie places her back at her Tucson residence on the evening of January 31st. She went inside. She closed the door. That is the last confirmed moment of Nancy Guthrie's ordinary life. What happened between that door closing and the moment her family tried to reach her the following morning? We are going to reconstruct now, not from assumption, from the physical record left behind in that house. Because the house, it turns out, kept a very detailed account of what occurred inside it. February 1st, 2026. Nancy does not appear for scheduled plans. The call goes unanswered. Then another call. Unanswered. Family members, people who knew exactly what her silence meant, went to the house. Stand at that front door for a moment. You are not arriving with law enforcement. You are a family member who has driven to a home you know well, with a mounting sense that something is not right, and you are about to go inside. What they found was not the quiet of a woman who had simply stepped out. It was a scene that told its own story before anyone asked a question. Signs of a physical struggle, blood at the residence, confirmed by law enforcement, not speculation, not social media inference. Blood in a home belonging to an 84-year-old woman who had been seen alive and well the previous evening. Tucson police did not arrive and classify this as a welfare check. A welfare check is what you send when you are not sure if someone needs help. They were sure. Within the first assessment of that scene, investigators made a classification decision that would set the architecture for everything that followed. This was a criminal abduction. That word, abduction, carries legal weight that missing person does not. It changes the investigative mandate, the jurisdictional authority, the resources that can be deployed. Federal agencies do not enter missing person cases as a matter of routine.
Into Nancy
They
Guthrie's
enter
sudden
criminal
disappearance.
abductions.
Make sure you
The
subscribe
fact that federal investigators
and
became
toggle all
involved in the
notifications
Nancy
to stay
Guthrie
updated on
case
this case.
is not a
That evening
detail to
remained
gloss
a void,
over.
not for lack of
It is a
activity,
declaration from law enforcement about what they believe happened in that house.
but
Now,
because of its sheer
place
density.
the 2:47
Words failed
a.m.
everyone for a time,
Call
especially
back
as the
into
press
this
arrived
timeline.
while the sun was
If
still
Nancy
low.
was taken from her
Lens
home on
caps
the
were-
night of January 31st, and the blood evidence and signs of struggle tell us the encounter
caps
at
were
that
off,
residence
and
was not
microphones
peaceful,
were poised,
then the
with
call
every
placed at
journalist waiting for a
2:47
single
a.m.
crack
on
in the
February
silence.
1st did not
Anything
happen
to
during
spark
the
momentum.
abduction. It
For
happened
several-
after it. Nancy was already gone by the time someone picked up that burner
Exposure was
phone and
immediate,
reported in.
and there was no panic in
The
his
call
measured gait.
is not the
He
crime in
moved with
progress.
surgical precision,
The call
as if
is
he
the
had already
debrief.
walked this exact path
Someone
1,000
checking.
times in
Did
private.
the plan hold?
The room felt that
Did the
stillness.
ransom
It
contact
wasn't
get made?
theatrics, but rather
What is
the
her
total
condition? The call at 2:47 does not announce a crime.
given until
It
this
manages
moment.
one already
He approached
completed.
the stand, leaned
That
into the
reframe is
microphone,
not minor.
and slowly scanned the
It
faces in
means
the crowded
person who made that call was not improvising. They were operating within a
threat.
structure.
Generally,
A plan with
modifying
phases
family
and
financial structures
contingencies.
is standard practice
Condition
and
update.
happens routinely without
Ransom
drawing
status.
any legal or criminal
Coordination
scrutiny.
with Marcus. These are not the words of someone in a panic. They are the words of someone who
gallery.
expected this
The air
moment
in the
and knew
room
what to
seemed to
say
thicken,
when it arrived.
creating a slight heavy pause in
Look
the
at the blood
investigative
evidence
timeline.
again.
Then came the words,
Signs of a
"I
struggle
was there."
indicate Nancy was
That
not
night-
incapacitated before the physical encounter. She fought back, or
the
attempted
focus had
to,
remained solely
or
on the
was not given
whereabouts
the
of a single
opportunity to
missing woman.
comply.
Suddenly, there was a
That
second
tells
person
us
in that house,
something about how the
unnamed,
abduction
unprofiled,
unfolded.
and completely off the
It
radar
was
of
not silent. It was not clean. Someone inside that house endured a level
having a
of
very
violence
clear
that left a
trajectory.
forensic trace.
These adjustments restricted
And someone
access
walked
and
out of that
reallocated
house,
authority,
got into a
which,
vehicle,
for anyone tied
and proceeded
to
to
that
manage
power,
the
represents
operational
a significant
fallout
threat
at
of investigators.
2:47 in the
In
morning,
the rear of the gallery,
as though
a
violence had
detective
been
took a
part of the
slow
calculation
note,
all along.
underlining the statement
On
with heavy
February
ink.
2nd,
This wasn't
the
a
day
mystery
after that
anymore.
call,
It was a
a red
sequence
Honda was found abandoned. The location has not been publicly specified
on her
by law
presence.
enforcement,
Her life was built
but the
on
abandonment
routines,
itself is
and those
significant.
routines leave deep,
Vehicles are
predictable
abandoned
grooves in
when
the
they
world.
have served their
Morning light
purpose and
hitting the
become a
kitchen tile,
liability.
a specific
A
ceramic
car
mud, the
left behind
accelerometer
the day
detected
after a
erratic,
kidnapping,
violent,
the day after a
physical motion,
post-abduction
the kind
phone
of
debrief,
movement that
is
suggests
not a
someone is being
coincidence.
physically handled.
It is a loose
By
end being cut,
8:52,
or an evidence trail being walked, depending on who finds it first.
sequence of events.
By
To find
February
the truth,
2nd,
you have to
law
rewind.
enforcement had a crime
Before
scene
the cameras
with
and
blood
search
evidence,
parties,
a
before
confirmed
the
abduction
silence in that
classification,
house started to
federal
feel like a
involvement,
weight.
and an abandoned vehicle. They had DNA collected
Two,
from the Guthrie
Nancy's
residence.
heart was in the throes
They
of an
had
acute
thousands of
cardiac
hours
crisis.
of surveillance
At
footage from the
9:00
surrounding
to 3
area to begin
p.m.,
reviewing.
The transmission
They had a
simply
forensic
ceased.
foundation.
It wasn't
What they did not have, what they still do not have as of April 2026,
wasn't that her
is a
heart had
named
stopped
suspect
beating
in
yet.
custody.
The connection to the
3
external
months.
monitor had been severed.
Federal agencies,
21 minutes passed
DNA
between the
in a
initial
lab
alarm
somewhere.
and total silence.
Thousands of hours
Detective-
of footage, no arrest. Either that investigation is being conducted with
Nancy was a
extraordinary
legal professional
precision,
who knew
every
exactly what
piece
to
held
ask,
tight until
and
the
she had
case is
begun
airtight,
implementing specific
or
procedural
something in the
changes
investigative
that
process has
investigators
complicated the
identified as
path
having
to an
a
arrest in ways that have not been publicly explained. Both possibilities deserve scrutiny, and that is exactly where we are going next. Let's talk about what a committed investigation actually looks like, because the Nancy Guthrie case has one, and it still has not produced a public arrest. Federal involvement is not automatic. When Tucson police classified this as a criminal abduction, the escalation to federal agencies followed the evidence, not a procedural checkbox. A federal jurisdiction in kidnapping cases activates under specific conditions. Interstate movement of a victim, ransom demands that cross state lines, or the scale of the operation warranting resources beyond local capacity. The fact that federal investigators entered this case tells us something about what law enforcement believes they are dealing with. This was not assessed as a local crime of opportunity. It was assessed as something more structured. The DNA recovered from the Guthrie residence is in a lab. That process is not fast, and it is not simple. Forensic DNA analysis in an active abduction investigation involves multiple steps: extraction, profiling, comparison against known samples, upload to federal databases for CODIS matching, and, if a suspect has been identified, direct comparison against reference samples. Each of those steps takes time, even when prioritized. The timeline for DNA results in a case this complex can stretch across weeks or months. The absence of a public announcement is not evidence that the DNA produced nothing. It may be evidence that what it produced is being held until the moment it can be used most effectively in a prosecution. The surveillance footage is a different problem. Thousands of hours. That is not a figure used loosely. It reflects the density of residential camera coverage in modern American neighborhoods. Doorbell cameras, Ring devices, business security systems, traffic cameras at intersections within a half-mile radius. Each of those systems records continuously, stores locally or in the cloud, and requires a legal process to obtain. Working through thousands of hours of footage means identifying every vehicle that passed Nancy's street in a window spanning at least 24 hours around the abduction, running plate reads where possible, and building a movement map of everyone who was in that neighborhood before, during, and after January 31st. Investigators called it thorough. The timeline calls it something else: slow. Here's the tension that this investigation sits inside. When a ransom kidnapping fails, when the payment is demanded and does not arrive, or arrives and the handoff collapses, the perpetrator faces a compounding problem. The hostage is now a liability. Every hour the victim is alive, she is a witness. Every hour the perpetrator holds her, they are accumulating exposure. Ransom kidnappings that resolve without payment do not typically end well for the victim. Law enforcement knows this, which means investigators are not working this case with the luxury of patience. They are working it with the pressure of a clock they cannot publicly acknowledge. No arrest, no named suspect, no recovered victim. 3 months in. Either the case is airtight and moving toward an arrest that has not yet been announced, every piece locked down, every witness secured, every forensic match confirmed, or there is a complication in the investigative record that has not been made public. Both are possible. Neither is reassuring. And then, in late March 2026, something happened that made everything worse. An official account
Developments are
connected to
surfacing in the
communications around the
investigation
case
into Nancy Guthrie's
posted an
sudden
update
disappearance.
stating that Nancy
Make sure you
Guthrie had been
subscribe
located.
and toggle all
She had
notifications
not.
to stay updated on this
The
case.
post was wrong.
That evening remained
It
a
was
void,
corrected
not
quickly,
for lack of
and
activity.
the family confirmed she remained missing. But the damage from that post was not
but
corrected
because of
as
its sheer
easily as the
density,
text was deleted.
Words failed everyone for a
That
time.
error matters
especially
for
as
reasons
the press
beyond
arrived
embarrassment.
while the sun was still low.
Public trust in
Lens
official
caps were-
communications around active cases is the mechanism by which investigators
Caps
receive
were off,
tips.
and microphones were
When a
poised,
credible-seeming
with
official
every
source
journalist
produces
waiting
a
for
false
single
report,
crack in the
even
silence.
briefly,
Anything
even
to spark
retracted,
momentum.
it tells every member of the
several-
public following that case that the information environment around this
Exposure
investigation
was
is not
immediate,
reliable.
and there was no panic
It
in his measured
validates the
gait.
impulse to look
he moved
elsewhere.
with surgical precision,
It creates
as if
the
he had
vacuum
already
that
walked
accounts
this
like
exact
criminal
path
network
1,000
rush to
times in
fill.
private.
The
room felt
investigation
that
is
stillness.
thorough.
It wasn't
The
theatrics,
silence is
but
deliberate.
rather the total
Those two things are not the same. And in that gap between
given
what
until this
investigators know and
He
what they have
approached the
chosen to
stand,
say,
leaned into the microphone,
appeared.
and slowly scanned the faces in
in
the crowd.
early April 2026, an ex-account called Criminal Network published a series of posts about the
Generally,
Nancy Guthrie
modifying
case.
family financial
The account had been
structures is
following the
standard
investigation
practice
for
and
some
happens
time,
routinely without
but these
drawing
posts were
any
different.
legal or criminal
Not
scrutiny.
in tone, in specificity. Read this carefully. The post alleged that
Crowded
text
gallery.
messages recovered
The
from
air in the
family
room seemed to
devices
thicken,
detailed
creating
Nancy's
a slight,
daily
heavy
routine,
pause in the
her
investigative
use of sleeping
timeline.
pills,
Then came the
backdoor
words,
access
"I was
points,
there."
and instructions
That
on disabling security cameras. It alleged that a call placed at
The focus had
2:47
remained solely
a.m.
on
to
the
a burner
whereabouts of a
phone
single missing
discussed
woman.
Nancy's
Suddenly,
condition
there was a
and
second
referenced a
person in
failed
that house,
ransom attempt.
unnamed,
It
unprofiled,
alleged
and
that the
completely
call was
off the radar of
coordinated with an individual named Marcus, whose vehicle was captured on a neighbor's doorbell
having a
camera
very clear
idling near
trajectory.
Nancy's home around
These
the time of the
adjustments
abduction.
restricted access and
Stop.
reallocated authority,
Go back to Act
which,
2,
for
the
anyone
back door,
tied to that
the sleeping
power,
pills,
represents
the
a
security
significant
cameras.
arm of investigators.
Those
In the
were the
rear of the
details
gallery,
we introduced
a
as
detective took
the
a slow
domestic
note,
geography of Nancy's
underlining the
ordinary
statement
life.
with heavy ink.
The
This wasn't
features
a
of her
mystery
home
anymore.
and
It
health
was a
that people
sequence
close to her knew without needing to ask. They did not learn Nancy's
on her
routine the
presence.
night they
Her
took her.
life was built on
They
routines.
had been studying it.
And those routines leave
That
deep,
is what the Criminal
predictable
Network
grooves
Post
in
is
the world.
describing.
Morning light hitting the
Not
kitchen
an
tile,
abduction
a
that happened
specific ceramic
impulsively,
mug, the
but a
accelerometer
surveillance
detected
operation that
erratic,
preceded it.
violent, physical
Someone
motion.
mapped her
The kind of
vulnerabilities
movement
before
that
the night of
suggests someone is
January
being
31st.
physically handled.
The sleeping
By
pills tell you when
8:52,
to go. The back door tells you how to enter without triggering a front-facing camera.
sequence of events.
The
To
security
find the
camera
truth,
disable
you have to
instructions
rewind.
tell you that the cameras
Before the
were known
cameras and
about
search parties,
and accounted for
before
in
the
the plan.
silence in that house started
These are
to
not
feel like a
details
weight.
you gather on the night of an abduction. These are details you gather over days
2.
or weeks
Nancy's
of observation.
heart was in the throes of an acute
The account's
cardiac
credibility
crisis.
claim is
At
notable.
9:0 to 3 p.m.,
Criminal Network
the
stated that
transmission
some of the information
simply
in its
ceased.
posts is
It
known
wasn't-
only to investigators, the family, and one other unnamed individual.
wasn't that her heart had stopped
That is
beating
either a
yet.
verifiable
the connection
assertion,
to the external monitor
in which
had been
case the
severed.
account has a source
21
with
minutes
genuine
passed
case
between the
access.
initial alarm and total
Or
silence.
it is a fabricated
Detective-
claim designed to manufacture credibility. Law enforcement has
Nancy
not
was a
commented
legal
on it,
professional who knew
which is
exactly
itself
what
not
to ask,
neutral.
and she had begun
Investigators
implementing
routinely issue
specific
corrections
procedural
when misinformation
changes
about
that
an active
investigators
case
identified as
threatens
having
the
a
investigation. The silence here is not confirmation, but it is also not a denial. Now, at the second call. Criminal Network also referenced a 1:44 a.m. call made to Nancy from a burner phone, described as someone in her inner circle. That call came 1 hour and 3 minutes before the 2:47 a.m. call we opened this video with. 2 burner phones. 2 different calls. 2 different phases of the same night. The 1:44 a.m. call goes to Nancy. That is the confirmation call. Checking that the sleeping medication has taken effect. Confirming she is incapacitated or asleep, or possibly, and this is the possibility that is hardest to sit with, speaking with her directly. An inner circle contact. Someone she would answer for in the middle of the night without alarm. The 2:47 a.m. call goes out from the scene. That is the debrief. Condition update, ransom status, coordination with Marcus. 1 hour and 3 minutes between those calls. That is the window in which Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home. Now, look at the vehicle. A car, described as associated with Marcus, was allegedly captured on a neighbor's doorbell camera idling near Nancy's home around the time of the abduction. If that footage exists, and doorbell camera footage from residential neighborhoods in Tucson on the night of January 31st would have been among the first evidence investigators requested, then law enforcement has already reviewed it. They know what that footage shows. Whether it shows what Criminal Network claims it shows is not something we can confirm from publicly available information, but the investigators know. And if the footage places a specific vehicle at that location at that time, it is already part of the forensic record being built toward a prosecution. Return to the beginning of this video, the call at 2:47 a.m. We opened on it as a hook, a timestamp in the dark, a burner phone, an unnamed woman whose condition was being reported to an unnamed man. You are hearing it differently now. That call was not the start of anything. It was the third beat in a sequence. Beat 1, the surveillance. Days or weeks of watching Nancy, mapping her routines, identifying her vulnerabilities. Beat 2, the 1:44 a.m. call. The confirmation that conditions were right, the final green light. Beat 3, the 2:47 a.m. call. The debrief, the ransom coordination, the handoff to Marcus. The planning is the story. It always was. As of April 2026, Nancy Guthrie has not been found. No suspect has been named. No arrest has been made. Federal agencies remain active in the investigation. DNA recovered from her Tucson home is being processed. Thousands of hours of surveillance footage have been reviewed or are still under review. The case is open. That is the official picture. Hold it next to what the evidence actually tells us. And the distance between those two things is where Nancy Guthrie's family lives every day. They know the case was classified as a criminal abduction within hours of her disappearance. They know federal agencies are involved. They know there is blood evidence, DNA evidence, and at least one abandoned vehicle in the investigative record. They know that unverified claims on social media have named an individual, described a vehicle, and referenced a failed ransom attempt, and that law enforcement has not corrected those claims. They are waiting. 3 months in, they are still waiting. The open questions are not rhetorical. Who is Marcus? Does law enforcement have a confirmed identity behind that name? And if so, what is the status of the case against him? What does the doorbell camera footage from the night of January 31st actually show? Has the DNA recovered from the Guthrie residence produced a profile match in CODIS or against a known reference sample? What happened to the ransom demand? Who received it? What was the figure and why did it fail? These are the questions investigators are working. They are also the questions that the public, and this audience specifically, can help keep in the media conversation. High-profile abduction cases lose coverage momentum. News cycles move, editors reassign, and when coverage drops, so does the pressure on investigators to move publicly toward resolution. Keeping this case visible, sharing verified updates, following credible journalists covering it, demanding accountability from local and national media for the depth of their reporting, is not armchair speculation. It is how cold cases stay warm. If you have any information relevant to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, contact the Tucson Police Department or the FBI's tip line. Links are in the description. Do not post investigative tips on social media. Tips posted publicly compromise their value and can alert suspects. End on Nancy. Not on the burner phones, not on Marcus. Not on the abandoned Honda or the failed ransom or the 2:47 a.m. call. On the woman who made dinner plans, kept them, came home, and closed her front door behind her on the evening of January 31st, 2026. She was 84 years old. She lived in a home she knew well. She had family who noticed her absence within hours because her presence had always been that reliable. She was chosen, not at random, not in a moment of impulse, by people who had been watching her live her life and decided she was worth taking. That decision was made long before 2:47 in the morning.